special guest. I'm really excited about this one. I've been trying to get her on. We've been discussing this for quite some time. She was a standout college women's volleyball player at Cerritos, won a state title in 1992, was the California State Player of the Year in 1992, ended up transferring to Long Beach State, where she was a two-time All-Big West selection, an AVCA second-team All-American, not to mention an All-American with Cerritos, won a national championship with the 49ers in 1993, and was inducted into the Cerritos College Hall of Fame in 2012 in March. And she just finished her third season with Cal Poly Pomona. She is the head coach of the women's program with the Broncos. And with that, my pleasure to bring on to the show head coach Traci Dahl. Coach, good morning. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Good morning, Jonah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I think I learned more about basketball in this last 10 minutes listening to you than I have in a long time.
Well, I figured volleyball takes place in a gymnasium. Oftentimes the court is versatile for basketball and for volleyball. So it's a learning opportunity across the board.
No doubt, no doubt.
So it's funny, Coach, because your program had such an historic season that I'll touch on, but you started off the year in the preseason not even ranked at all in the preseason. And I remember, and for those who don't know, I had the privilege of calling all of Cal Poly Pomona's home volleyball matches this year. And I remember the first match you guys played at the Broncos Fall Classic. Now, I didn't know that it would end up leading you guys on an 11-match win streak to start the year, but I knew then this team looks really good. And lo and behold, you guys would be ranked within the first official ranking, and you would go on to have a 23-5 overall season, an historically great season, one of the best volleyball seasons at Cal Poly Pomona in the history of their program. You finished a top 25 program. At what point in the year, or how early on in the season, did you know that you had a really special team?
I think none of us knew we were going to go 11-0 in the beginning, and that first tournament really showed the character of the team, the hardworking team that we had. You know, they did a lot of work in the 17 months that we had off, so that really showed its face. And I think a lot of the work was done also in July. We were able to come back for about a month before the season started, which typically is not the case. So the whole team committed to doing that. And so we actually had like about a month's worth of practice before we had to actually start season. So I would say after the second week, the coaching staff and I started looking at the team. We thought, you know, we've got a really balanced group here, and everybody can come in and step in and play and help us win at any time. And I think that was the biggest factor that helped us throughout the season, was every single player was a viable person to put in the game. You know, our practice environment was probably one of the most competitive environments I've ever had in my career as a volleyball coach. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons why we were so successful.
And obviously you guys ended up reaching the conference championship game in a conference that I think is arguably the toughest, if not one of the toughest conferences in the nation at the Division II level. The CCAA was a gauntlet this year. You qualified for the NCAA tournament as well. And it's interesting because, to me, Coach, volleyball, when it comes to momentum in volleyball, it's such a transient thing, because there are moments when you're on the right side of a kill and you deliver the blow, and in the next instance, you're the one getting pelted in the face by the volleyball. And yet your team throughout the season showed so much composure, but more importantly, I saw a real joy and a real passion, and the fact that the players really seem to relish playing with one another, which I think is something that is so profound on a volleyball team. Getting a chance to be up close and being on the sidelines, how much fun did you have getting a chance to coach this team when it looked like they were so close?
This year, honestly, Jonah, was super fun for me, and we talked a lot about our team culture early on, and how much passion the girls had for the game, and how much they wanted to win. And we thought, how are we going to make this happen? Not only are we athletic, but you can be a fully athletic team and not win games. And so I think one of the biggest, another big reason of why we were so successful was that our team culture was at an all-time high. I mean, if you looked at the players that were in the game and the players that were not in the game, everybody was in the game. Our bench crew, they were laying on the ground after a kill. I mean, they were so excited, and everybody was in it and present all the time. And so that to me was one of the most exciting things, because I would look down at the bench and it was almost like they were in the game. They were present in the moment, and they were in it. So that was really exciting for all of us, the coaching staff. We just really enjoyed watching them, battle. We battled so hard this year in so many instances, and we would be down by 8 or 9 points. And for some reason, we stayed composed. Our leaders stepped in, and we ended up winning those sets, winning the matches. And Jonah, you saw some of these rallies. They were like, I mean, sometimes 15 seconds long. These were like a minute long, and everybody's dying at the end, So that, to me, that's exciting. Being a coach is that just seeing how much they wanted to win and what they were going to do to get it done.
And I feel like identity, having an identity. I remember this was one of the first questions that I ever asked you when I met you. Now, granted, it was early on in the season. Was what's the identity of this team? And at the time, you were kind of a little unsure because it was still percolating. The team was still kind of building on top of itself. Now that you've had a chance to step away from the season, obviously it's still a little bit raw, but now that you're away from it, what do you think the identity was of this team this year?
I think, to put it in a nutshell, there's probably a lot of different words to speak on our identity, and it changed almost every match, and it got better. But I think having a positive environment was big. I could completely tell when our energy level was up and everybody was, cheering for each other and excited. I could tell that we're gonna win those types of games. We're gonna win the game. Hardworking environment. This team was extremely hardworking, and they would hold each other accountable in practice. And that's one of the things that we preach as well, is that it can't always come from the coaches. If we're always the ones, harping on you or trying to get you to do something or, be disciplined, it's not going to work. This has to be a collective effort. And I found that was one of the keys. We, as coaches, we didn't have to necessarily push them in that regard. They were able to hold themselves accountable, which made us able to work on different things to kind of bring us to another level.
And I obviously highlighted some of the highlights of your playing career when I introduced you, but when did you kind of first get involved in volleyball? What initially drew you to the sport?
That's an interesting question, Jonah. So when I was in high school, I actually was in the band, and I was a very good flute player. So we used to have to march in these parades. And one day in the parade, I'm marching, and of course, I'm like 3 heads taller than anybody else. And the volleyball coach got one of his players to approach me and get me to try out for volleyball. And I said, well, if you can get me out of marching in these parades on Saturdays, then I'll play your sport of volleyball. And so that's how it all started, my sophomore year in high school. And, after that, I just really enjoyed the sport. I enjoyed the team type culture. I enjoyed being around a bunch of people and working towards a common goal. So started my sophomore year in high school and has been in volleyball ever since.
And obviously you've been watching, you've been coaching volleyball. Now that you get a chance to see it through a different lens, when you kind of compare the way that the sport was played when you were playing versus how it is now? In your mind, what do you think the biggest difference is, or the biggest differences are?
Well, when I played, it was side out scoring. So we played to 15, and you can only win by, your serve, winning when you're serving. And now with rally scoring, you're basically winning a point or losing a point every single play. So you really have to be pretty accurate and present. Volleyball has become a game where we're actually getting points off of the opponent's mistakes, where before we didn't. So I think that there's just a big difference in the way the scoring has happened. The way they call the volleyball game these days. The setting, passing, all that stuff. So there's a lot of differences. The libero is now in the game, where back when I played, we didn't have a libero.
Interesting. And that's kind of interesting, because the libero, to me, now that I've gotten a chance to watch volleyball much more closely, not that I ever thought it was an underrated position. Obviously it isn't, but when you only have 3 touches and the first touch is a defensive dig, to be able to kind of set up your setter perfectly to then run your offensive system, the libero is really crucial to that whole offensive piece. So you touched on culture, and obviously establishing culture is so difficult. And when you took over the program in 2019, obviously that was your first season. And 2020, you didn't have a season due to COVID. And so when you really look at your timeline, obviously it's your 5th season with the Broncos altogether, a couple years as an assistant, but this was really your 2nd full season as a head coach when you consider the fact that last season didn't happen at all. And you took over for a legend at Pomona in Rosie Wiegrich, who was the head coach for 27 seasons. And yet the turnaround, what you were able to accomplish from 2019 to this season, was enormous. And to me, just the tip of the iceberg in what you will end up accomplishing with Cal Poly Pomona. When you kind of think back, when you think about the culture that you're trying to foster, that you're trying to cultivate, what are your goals for this program, and what's the kind of culture? You touched on it a little bit, but what are the goals for you for this program, and what's the type of culture that you're trying to cultivate with Cal Poly Pomona?
In 2018, we had a really successful season. That was Rosie's last year. And I always tease her, because I'll tell her, I'll say, Rosie, you graduated everybody, and you graduated everybody left me, in 2019. And so, 2019, we had a few returners, and we had actually 10 newcomers. So I knew that year was going to be a little bit difficult on a lot of levels. And one, it's hard just to get to know your team when you have so little time in August, before the season starts. So we went through the season. Obviously, we're not that successful. We had some battles. We won some nice games, but we weren't where we wanted to be. And then COVID hit in 2020, and we decided that, how we're going to make this program better is by becoming closer as a unit during this time. This is all we have was Zoom. All we had was Zoom. And so the players, they committed to doing things on their own and getting to the point to where they didn't want to go through 2019 again. None of us did. None of us did. And so here we are in 2021, and nobody could have forecasted this season. You just never know how the cards are going to play out. But I'll tell you, these players did the work that they needed to do during COVID to set the table for themselves to be successful. So for me, I feel that Cal Poly Pomona is an institution that we can recruit the highest level athletes there. I mean, the community is great. The university is awesome, and one of my goals for this program is to win a national title. And I truly believe we can do it. And so recruiting is at an all-time high, finding players that are going to fit the Cal Poly Pomona volleyball identity, players that are going to be hardworking, players that want to win, that genuinely love volleyball, so those are some things those are some goals for me. We have to graduate our kids. It's not just about volleyball. I mean, A lot of these players are not going to go play professionally. So we want to make sure that not only are they going to be successful on the court, but they're going to be successful in life. At graduating from Cal Poly, you're almost guaranteed to get a job. It's a great school. And so those are some goals that I have for the program.
And what's great too, from, again, my limited time being with the program, with the university, is how invested they are in their athletic department, in trying to recruit the highest athletes, in investing in broadcasting, investing in personnel, investing in these types of things, which is very unique because not all athletic departments are willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is. And they do a great job of that. So, and for me, I always admired volleyball from afar, but I can't honestly say that I have as much appreciation for the sport, or that I had as much appreciation for the sport at the start of the season as I do now. I don't think I fully understand or understood and appreciated it the way that I do now. And from your perspective, you've been around the game forever, your whole life. Where do you think the popularity level is with regard to volleyball right now? And where would you like to see it, or how would you like to see it continue to grow?
I think to put it in perspective, when we were playing in the national title match in '93, we had a record attendance of, I think it was a little over 11,000. And now they're pulling probably double that attendance, maybe close to double to that attendance in the national final matches now. So I think just within that time frame, volleyball has grown. And where we're seeing a lot of growth is in the youth volleyball, the club system. There are so many volleyball clubs out there. So the opportunities for young girls to play volleyball and to get started at a young age, they're out there. They're everywhere, which is really good. And it's growing our sport. So I think I'd like to see it continue to grow, but I think it is going to continue to grow, at a rapid pace.
And it's interesting because for me, my alma mater is the University of Wisconsin. And that was one of the first sports that I actually got the privilege of calling, was a Wisconsin volleyball match. Now, at the time, they were just kind of breaking into the top 25. They had just scratched the surface. And then, of course, as I matriculated and as I moved on to California, they became a national title contender. And obviously last year they reached the final. So I was very invested in them. Okay, final question for you is, and I didn't tell you about this one, any pregame rituals or pregame superstitions you have, whether it was when you were a player or whether it is when you are a coach? Are you big into superstitions or pregame meals or rituals like that?
I'm really not big on the superstitions. Like, do I have to, touch the ceiling or something before I walk through the door? Nothing like that. But we do have a team routine that we go through, and I do like to keep that pretty on point. We'll do our serve and pass at a certain time. And right after that, we do our team meal. After that, the kids know that they go do their own thing, whether it's training room, whether it's they go listen to their music, whatever. And then we come together and we meet again for a little report, and then we go to battle. So, the routine starts probably about a couple hours prior to the match.
I like that because, sometimes coaches will have some, I know a lot of athletes, like they got to put on a certain sock on their left foot first and then the right foot and then the left shoe and the right shoe. So, you never know. You never really can quite tell. Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining me. I know you've got a really busy schedule. I know you've got different things to attend to, so I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jonah. I really appreciate it. And the whole season, just you calling our games has been amazing. And just hearing from our fans, they love you. They loved watching our games on the internet, and a lot of that had to do with you. So we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll let you go. That's Coach Traci Dahl. Thank you so much, Coach.
Bye. Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay.